All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and I am so excited to welcome back my friend and a previous guest of the show, Gillian Bennett. Gillian, I've done no research to go back and look at exactly which episode it was, and it doesn't really matter at this point. Gillian is a friend of the show, a friend of mine. Super excited to have her back on to share some updates on what she's got going on, both personally and professionally. Super excited with some recent news that she's had. And I will not belabor the point. Let's just get right into it. First, Gillian, welcome back. And can you start with introducing yourself to folks that are listening?
Yes. So JK, I just have to say, when you asked me, like, would you be open to recording another podcast episode? That was like a no-brainer for me.
And I appreciate that.
Yes,
time.
Sign me up all the time.
Yeah.
And let's see. So you mentioned personal and professional. So on a personal level, we just moved. So me and my partner, he's from he's Argentinian Italian. I'm American British, and we live in Spain, just to confuse people a little bit.
Did everybody just follow that?
Yeah, exactly. So between us, we have 4 passports. And so we just moved, and we also recently got engaged in Argentina, which is so much fun. And I was just telling JK how our wedding won't be for a couple years because we just bought an apartment, but also that our wedding will likely be just a giant barbecue, because if you know anything about Argentinian culture, it's just like meat, put the meat on the barbecue. So they don't really talk like that.
It's all right. It's all right. Your impression will not be reviewed on this particular podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's more like, hey, sí, necesitamos tener un asado. But that's also not, anyways, I'm not going to try to do accents. Anyways. And on a professional level, since we last talked, so JK, I believe the first time I was on your podcast might be like a year and a half to 2 years. No, probably 2 years ago.
I'm not gonna pretend to remember back when it was.
Yeah.
Because
Anyways, it was a long time ago. And within the last couple of years, it might be more than 2 years ago. Within the last couple of years, I was actually approached by a couple of macro coaches. This was now just about 2 years ago. And they were like, hey, I love what you do, because a lot of the work that I do is around mindful eating. It's around values-aligned decision-making. It's around really looking at coaching clients as sort of the whole person, and how do we improve their lives and build their self-trust around food so that they live really meaningful lives and aren't thinking about food in their bodies all the time. And so I was approached by a couple of macro coaches, and they were like, I love what you do. Can you teach me how to do this? And that was the birth of what is now my mentorship program. In the last year and a half, I've had about 20 coaches go through mentorship. And pretty much all of those coaches were mainly macro-based coaches before they came in. And now they have the capacity to choose, do I use macros with this client? Do I not use macros with this client? Even if I am using a macro-based approach with this client, they now have a really wide variety of skills to help this person develop self-trust with food, decision-making skills, critical thinking skills, and the ability to not track when they are ready to do that. And so it's been so beautiful, because it's really expanded clients' capacity to be less focused on food and body, which is, so many coaches are like, I wish my client would fixate less on the scale. And it's like, well, you're literally asking them for scale weight every week. How can you expect them to not focus on it?
Ooh,
exactly. Okay. And then on the other side, it's also really, one of the really cool things that I've seen is that for coaches, it's really expanding their ability to retain clients, because not only are they able to serve a wider variety of clients, like how many coaches have had a client come in and be like, I don't want to track macros. And then you're like trying to convince them, but it's not that hard. And really, you can just say, okay, great, here's all of these other options. But also, as far as retention goes, when you're able to support your clients with more than a macro plan, more than a focus on fat loss, more than like protein targets and meal planning, and you're actually able to get into like, who do I want to be as a person? Then clients are now sticking with you for like 9 months, 12 months, a year, 2 years, which is an incredible way to build a really stable business, is to have people that stick with you for a long time.
Man, that's, perfect. Yeah. I love that, that what I'll call origin point that you just mentioned, where you were doing what you do. And for those who are not aware, Gillian has had her podcast, Bite Size Nutrition. Well, what was the name of it? I'm so
So I've
sorry.
got two actually, but you're
Yeah,
right.
because I
Bite
was
size
just
nutrition
thinking,
is
I
one
was
of
like, wait,
them.
right.
Yes.
And then there's the Confident Coach.
Yeah, the Confident Coaching
Right.
podcast is the other one. The Confident
Right.
Coaching podcast is new. It's only got like 10 episodes so far.
Okay. So just starting with your work as a coach, primarily to clients, then people seeing that and saying, I want some of that. How can you help me then do that? Just really, I really dig that the origin point was someone or people, multiple people seeing the impact and being like, that's what I want to be able to do. How can I potentially get people there? So let me ask you this from your perspective, where does this initial like heavy bias on using macros as the primary tool come from when it comes to coaching?
Yeah.
Why do you, what's your perspective on that?
I love that question. I mean, anybody that listens to your podcast knows that you're great at question asking. But I really love this question because I think that right now we see sort of two camps where it's like the intuitive eating crowd and the macro tracking crowd. Like the what gets measured gets managed. And then the like, just trust your body. Like, and I think this dichotomy is part of the problem within our industry because it's not either I track macros or I understand how to listen to my body and I trust my body. And I think there's a heavy bias towards macros in the coaching community, in part because many coaches have seen physical success on their own tracking macros. And so it's very much this is what helped me. So now I must use this to help other people. And that is a bias. Like, it's completely understandable. If you bought an air fryer and an air fryer like changed how you cook, you're going to be like, everybody needs an air fryer, right?
Right.
And I think what within coaching is that we need to be able to have the capacity to step outside our own bias and recognize, hey, I have a bias towards using macros because it has been really helpful for me. I have seen it help other people. However, where we become truly like a client-centered coach is in being able to say, but is this really the right fit for the individual that I have in front of me? And that's where I think also, I've seen a lot of posts recently around like intuitive eating doesn't work. And it's like, well, if we're talking about intentional fat loss, then of course it doesn't. Intuitive eating is a framework and a methodology specifically created to be anti-intentional fat loss. So you're right, it doesn't. But when we talk about work, and this is where, like, as a coach, any coach or really any non-coach listening, when we think about what the definition of something quote unquote working is, if we are solely basing that off of weight control, we're forgetting that we also need to live our lives. And if living our lives means that I'm taking Tupperware with me places because I have to hit my macros, or living our lives means, I can't partake in, the meals that my kids want to eat and cook with me because I have to have a food scale next to me to make sure that I am eating the right amount, that's not living our lives. And so this is where what I really help coaches develop is an adaptable coaching approach that may use macros, but isn't reliant on macros to work. And the last thing I want to mention here is that often coaches are like, well, if I don't use macros with my clients, how do I know what they're eating? And my argument is we don't necessarily need to know exactly what our clients are eating to make really meaningful change in their nutrition patterns and in their lives. And that probably is going to piss some people off when they hear it.
Yes, I can think of one specific person, namely 2018 JK, who would have been one of those people. So let's get into that actually, because that's when I initially had, I'd say as a client, so pre-coaching, when I initially had my, like, we'll say best results, right? And we're talking when aesthetics was the primary, like, hey, this is going to be the gauge. For sure, it was when I was introduced to macro counting.
Mm-hmm.
And now looking back on it, I also understand that a big part of where my success, quote unquote, came from was also unbeknownst to me at the time, because I didn't know how to label it. I had, up until that point, because of my upbringing and environments that I've been around, I also had 30 plus years of understanding the importance of basic foundational habits and the importance of, and I'm not talking nutrition wise, I'm just talking like the importance of having some sort of a daily rhythm, the importance of um, understanding what my values were and what mattered to me, and all of these other things. And it's just this particular tool was then introduced and I applied a combination. But to me, as an individual, I was like, well, this new thing got introduced to me. So that must be the thing that unlocked everything, without ever really acknowledging this, like my past history and the base of all of the other things that I've done, and all that stuff. So when I then went into nutrition coaching along with personal training, and I don't do a lot on the nutrition coaching side. I'd rather just dig into the training and talk about the habits of nutrition and habits of sleep, things like that. Um, now, or when I first got into it, though, I definitely, like, I just started everybody off with counting macros, because I was just like, okay, well, this'll definitely work. And one of the reasons, I don't even know if I've really stated this like publicly, one of the reasons that I transitioned mostly to training was because I would find that even in instances where I'm trying to say, hey, let's just track maybe 3 days out of the week as opposed to every day. I remember I had a client who counted Skittles, and that's when I was like, listen, this is not what I intended for you to do. That's when I was just like, you know what? Let me start transitioning more to the training side, because I feel like I'm having to talk people out of something that I feel like can be helpful. So there's not really a question in that. I just want to share my own context for kind of what you just talked about. And I want to ask you, or do you have any, is that sparking any sort of thoughts or anything for you, or I
No,
can just
I
move
think
to
one of the things that, and
the,
especially like even with the name of this podcast, is like you're an infinitely curious person and
mm-hmm.
you're willing to challenge like your previously held beliefs. And I think it's also so helpful for us, just as humans, as coaches, like in whatever we do, to be able to recognize, oh, I'm experiencing a bit of confirmation bias here. Like, where I've done this thing and I feel like it works. So now I see all of the evidence of why it works, and being able to also intentionally step out of that and recognize, wait, is it actually working as well as I think? And this is not to discourage, like some individuals can use macros as an awareness tool for a short period of time. It feels really flexible. They don't obsess over it. When it comes time to be like, hey, I kind of know what a balanced plate of food looks like. Like I kind of know how much protein I need to eat. Cool. Now I'm going to like maybe track every so often. Not a big deal. Some people can do that. I think where the risk factor lies in so many individuals that we work with, and this is like what you experience, is have a tendency towards that perfectionistic all or nothing thinking. So many individuals have this really deep desire to like prove their self-worth through their appearance, and macro tracking can be a tool that ends up being like, it ends up driving people down a road that we could easily avoid if we weren't bringing that like need for numbers and precision and like being very specific about, you know, this amount of grams. Like that can be quite triggering for some people. And people will say like,
Yeah.
oh, it's not macros. Like macros aren't the problem. No, macros aren't the problem. But just like anything, like a hammer is not a problem. But if you're using a hammer to try to clean a window, it is a problem because you're gonna break the fucking window.
You might have a point there.
Right?
Yeah. So what about the person that would say to you, okay, so basically what you're saying is the tool itself is being misused. Actually, I just proved your point. The tool itself is being misused. So, you're focusing on like, hey, I hear you saying basically macros is not the approach that you're using to macros is the problem, not necessarily macros itself. Similar to any other type of quote unquote named diet, the diet itself is not the problem, it's the approach to the diet. So you're essentially, what I'm taking away is you're essentially saying like, hey, let me help you build your confidence in being able to not only use your hammer, but also your screwdriver and your measuring tape and all of the other tools that you have in your tool belt. So essentially, it's like, if you only have a hammer, then you think everything looks like a nail, and no matter what, you have it. It's like the handyman who literally walked on the job and was like, all right, I'm here with my hammer. And you're like, yeah, but I called you because I thought I needed something to be nailed, but it turns out my sink actually needs to be fixed.
Exactly.
So figuring out like what their goals actually really are.
Yeah. And a really important thing to keep in mind is that an individual who's struggling with disordered eating is more likely to seek out weight loss support than they are likely to seek out support for disordered eating, right? So I, as a one-on-one coach, I help individuals with relationship with food and with their body image and with their confidence. I help them develop mindful eating skills. I help them build like more of a values-aligned life. The results are incredible, but someone who is struggling really deeply with disordered eating, potentially even binge eating or like borderline eating disorder, they're not likely to seek me out. They're more likely to say, no, I need to lose weight. So they're more likely to seek out a macro coach that is going to give them the safety of, here is your macro plan. Here's the specific things that you need to follow. And that actually continues the cycle of disordered eating.
Yeah, man. You're so spot on. I'm trying to think. Okay, there's two things I want to make sure that I get to. One is making sure that we can talk about helping people, how to help coaches really diagnose like why that person has the goal that they have. And I think related to that too, and that's an idea that you brought up, which I actually love that, absolutely love that topic. I think that's directly related to also the entry point for that particular coach's funnel for the client. So I'll try to spit it out this way and then let you try to translate, because you already speak like 25 different languages anyway, so you can like translate JK here. Okay, so the very, very profound and, from my perspective, super accurate statement that you just made and identified is that the person who typically needs to do the majority of their work on their mindset and their approach to their overall nutrition strategy is likely not the person who will be drawn to the coach who's talking about, I'm going to help you really align, like a word that I use a lot in my coaching is alignment. Like, I'm going to help you align your actions to the things that truly matter to you. That is not necessarily the individual who's going to be scrolling through Instagram and go, oh, okay, I'm looking for somebody who's talking about values. I'm looking for somebody who's talking about alignment with your lifestyle. What they're going to do is they're going to scroll, my assumption, and they're going to stop on the transformation photo. They're going to stop on the eye-catching, whatever it may be. Okay. So knowing that, or believing that, let me say believing that, and I'll own this belief. I don't have to put it on anybody else. Then talk to me about how a coach can begin to play in the, or not play, but be in an industry where so many people won't stop the scroll on the values coach unless there's something eye-catching. There's the transformation photo, the whatever it is, the I need to hold my shirt up before I talk about what I eat in a day, and then we'll get into like, how do you wrestle, or how do you address that? Let me not say wrestle, because I'm putting my own issues on you. So
That is
Yeah.
such an
Talk to me
incredible
about that.
question, because that is a lot of the reason why individuals continue to post transformation photos, why many coaches use their own physiques to bring in clients, because that does get views, that does get likes. And I think that I would be completely incorrect and full of bullshit if I was to tell you that you're going to get more likes and views talking about like values aligned goals than you are talking about here's how I got my abs. It's just, it's not going to happen. However, this is where we dive into what are your values as a human and your values as a coach. Because for me, I would feel really icky trying to sell like, this is how I got my abs, knowing that like genetically, when I'm at a certain body fat percentage, like you can just see my abs. Like that. And so ethically, I don't want to go to sleep at night being like, I just sold something to someone knowing that like, that's not a result that I can offer them. I think that this comes down to a couple of different things. One is the immense pressure that coaches put on themselves to stand out physically instead of stand out as far as their reputation and the information they put out and the ethos that they have. And one of the things I'm so incredibly proud of is my reputation within the coaching space, where I will get messages from coaches I have never talked to. And they're like, someone referred me to you. I started following you because this person, and it's like, I'm in my little corner of the internet. It's not like I have 200,000 followers by any means, but so much of that is because I stand behind my coaching values, and my business has survived for 8+ years because I have refused to compromise those values. And the information that I put out there, the support that I put out there is evidence-based. And the evidence supports more of a health-centric approach to nutrition than weight-centric as far as like overall well-being, healthier eating behaviors, improved body satisfaction, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one side, is like, who do you want to be and who do you want to stand for? Like, do you want to be trying to yell louder than other coaches on the internet because that gets more likes, but you don't actually need a lot of likes to get clients? Like, there are individuals that have very small followings, but are making a shit ton of money because they truly speak to their clients' core desires. And someone that is seeking out a transformation, understanding how they think, understanding what their desires are, you can speak to that without having to grab their attention using a transformation photo. And part of that is looking into your current clients. What are the things that they struggle with the most? It's not necessarily like wanting to see the scale go down. It's when they don't see the scale go down, what does that do to how they feel, how they interact with people? That's really what's affecting them. Or like the client, it's not that they want to be able to hit their protein when they go out for lunch with their family, because like that doesn't really matter. It's more of like, can I be present with my friends, with my family when I am out to brunch, instead of mentally calculating calories in my head? And when you speak to those deeper emotions and deeper desires, that's when you truly connect with people and you create those like really strong connections within both the coaching space, where you're creating a reputation for yourself of being someone that is truly getting to the root of what people need from you. But also clients are like, I feel like you're speaking to me.
And that's, man, okay, you just broke that down really well. And for those that are listening, whether you're a coach or a client, I want to point something out. Coach, client, or non-client, or just like the average person
Regular
listening,
dude.
which regular dude, regular chick. I don't know if chick works these days, but whatever. I am who I am. Something that I want to point out is something that Gillian just did, which is really one of the hallmarks of somebody who really kind of gets it here. Is there's one thing to talk about your relationship with food. Like, I'm going to help you improve your relationship with food. It's another thing for someone to be able to give you specific examples of what that means when it comes to not feeling like your relationship with food is where you want it to be. So, for example, I'm at dinner with my kids, and in my head, I'm actually trying to calculate exactly how many grams of protein this particular thing is, which is then taking away from actually enjoying that particular moment with my kids. And I point that out because there's sometimes where we as coaches use these terms like heal your relationship with food, or food freedom, or whatever the case may be. And something that my clients have reported back to be helpful, and also that I really pick up, is it's being able to give people actual real life examples, because we're at a point now in this industry, especially with the rise of tools like ChatGPT, like we are at a point now where it's hard to say the wrong thing. Like everybody can say the right thing at this point. Like the buzzwords, mindset, and all of these different things.
Yeah.
Everybody's got access to that at this point. So being able to go beyond that and actually explain to you, okay, well, this is what food freedom for you, it sounds like, based on what you said, this is what food freedom potentially could look like for you, like that sort of a thing. So, because I am beyond annoyed at this point with talking to a new client, and I'm not annoyed by the client, I'm annoyed by the previous approach. So annoyed with talking to a new client who can talk to me about like, yeah, we spent time, I'm in the training space. So like, yeah, we spent time on, really let's get a plan that's aligned with my goals and really fits into my lifestyle, and I'll have flexibility and all this other stuff. I'm like, okay, so if you were to look at your program, talk to me about how that particular program aligned with your lifestyle. So actually, let's just talk about your lifestyle. And they have such difficulty being able to pair those two things together. Because I'm like, because at the end of the day, what I see is 35 exercises that you're supposed to get done in 35 minutes. And you told me that you're stressed because you're late to pick up, you barely sleep, and all these other things. So that's just a little side note there. So let's talk about the helping people understand why they have the goals that they have. Can you, I didn't tee that off really well, but you mentioned this.
I can run with it. Don't you worry.
Because that was enough. When you messaged me that, I was like, oh, so help me understand why someone has the goals that they have. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So when we think about why someone has the goals that they have, we need to recognize that the way that we view the world is influenced by our experiences, our inputs, the media that we consume. So it's not just like, this is what I truly want as a human. It's there's what I want as a human, which humans have like pretty similar needs. Like we want to feel part of a community. We want to feel loved and cared for. We want to feel like we have like some sense of security. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like we want to make sure that we have those basics covered. But then we look at like, hey, the type of media I consume is going to influence the desires that I have, right? The people that I surround myself are going to influence the desires that I have and the goals that I have. And one of the things that when I mentor coaches, we talk quite a lot about self-determination theory and understanding like self-determination theory as a theory of motivation. And the reason being is that self-determination theory explains sort of like the components that an individual needs in order to sustain motivation over time towards a goal, but also looks at different types of motivation and how those different types of motivation towards a goal play into our sustainability or sustention. I don't know how to say that word, of like towards a goal, right?
Okay. Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I was saying this before we recorded is I went through some of the intake questionnaires for my old mentoring clients. So the clients that started with me, they're no longer with me, just to kind of like refresh my brain on what were their biggest struggles when they came into mentorship. And one of the things that I heard over and over is like, my clients tell me that they have a goal and then they lose motivation towards that goal. And this to me indicates is that we need to understand a little bit better, like what is driving, like you said, what is driving those goals? And so all of this to say is when a client comes to us or when we have a goal, like when a goal exists in the ether, right, is we need to understand what factors are playing into it and where we see motivation as being sort of most likely to be sustained is when those goals tend to be not extrinsic. So not coming from like, I should do this, I have to do this, my doctor told me to do this, my husband told me to do this, like this Fit Pro told me I have to do this. It's more when it's coming from either like integrated or intrinsic motivation. And there's kind of a range of this where like on one side, on like pure intrinsic motivation is like, I love doing the thing, right? So for example, I am like intrinsically motivated to make coffee. Like I like the taste of coffee. I like the experience of making my coffee. Like that's something I'm intrinsically motivated to do every day, right? I like the feeling of like drinking coffee. Where something that's integrated that aligns with my values is, for example, I am like, it aligns with my values to be a creative person. And so, for example, I am motivated to seek out activities that inspire my creativity. And so, for example, last year, I tried out art class. And I didn't actually intrinsically enjoy art class. Like I realized after kind of the first or second class that it was like, this is too quiet. Like it's not really my vibe. But I was motivated to continue to go because it aligned with my values as something that inspired creativity. Now, we can also look at this as, for example, I'm not always intrinsically motivated to go to the gym. Like some days I really don't feel like it. And this is where we'll often see like, you got to rely on discipline. I don't rely on discipline. I rely on the fact that it aligns with my values to be someone that exercises. And then I use different mental skills to say, okay, how am I going to feel after I exercise? How important is this value to me of like being, I'm someone who does this, right? And I'm able to look at how it fits into my life and get myself to the gym even when I don't feel like it, because I'm someone that acts in alignment with my values, even when I don't necessarily feel quote unquote like that fun sensation of like being motivated, right? So all that to say, when we look at an individual's goals, let's say someone is like, hey, I really want to lose weight. We need to understand, where is that goal coming from? Because it's very different to say like, hey, my knees really hurt. Like I have young kids and my knees hurt and I want to run after them. And it's important for me to like have the energy and the stamina and the strength to run after them. And I think that losing some weight would make me really feel better in my body so that I can be the person I want to be in my life. That's very different than saying, I really want to lose weight because I don't feel sexy and I feel like I need to feel sexy, because then we need to address it from a different perspective. Because feeling sexy is not a specifically weight-related issue. It has more to do with our body image, which are our perceptions and attitudes towards our body. I see your brain work. I'm going to pause because I see your brain working there.
It's Gillian, my brain is always, it's always moving. I don't know that it's always like doing a whole lot of productive work, but it's always thinking for sure. Yeah, this is really good. And what comes to mind is both an external and internal conversation that I used to have fairly often when going through this sort of, I'm going to call it a framework, but whatever, going through this path of really like peeling back the layers and, doing my like, well, help me understand, when you reach that particular goal weight, what's that going to do for you? Like, what are you hoping that will unlock for you? And my approach to that is still exactly the same, This is kind of what I talk about, what I was referring to when I talked about back when I would lead with Math Grows as a nutrition coach. I was still asking some of those same questions. However, I didn't have like a great framework with understanding like, okay, hey, dude, you actually do have a structure here that isn't completely macro based. You're just not really like, you haven't named it and you're not following like something that's super identifiable. So something that I would have a conversation about and I would talk to other coaches about is this this battle of, well, I feel like now I'm trying to talk someone out of the goals that they have. So someone, common scenario, somebody comes to you and says, I really need to change my body composition. I want to lose weight. I want to lose body fat. I need to build some muscle, that sort of a thing. And along the way, you're getting an understanding for, okay, well, when you want to be the type of person that, fill in the blank here. And then as you're going through it, you're like, you know what? It's actually not like this person is actually not specifically looking for weight loss and whatnot. They've actually got, they're looking to try to improve their relationship with somebody who the last time that they said they loved them was when they weighed 135 pounds. Like that's a legit, like I've had that exact example more than once where there's some sort of, respectfully, like trauma or really negative experience that they're now basing something on because the last time or prior to that particular experience, they remember that they weighed a certain thing or they looked a certain way. And that was before that particular thing happened. And there's this battle of, oh man, this particular individual is telling me that this is what they're looking for. But the whole time along the way, I can see that what they actually are trying to do is improve this particular situation, or they're trying to, navigate this very difficult thing that they're going through, and they're attaching like a number to the resolution of those particular things. Like they feel like they're out of alignment, like you've mentioned, with their values. And what do you say to the coach who's like, man, I can see that, like, I can see what the intrinsic motivation is. I don't know that the client actually agrees that that's the intrinsic motivation, or they don't agree with it. So they don't quite see it. So during that check-in process, during the, follow up on where quote unquote compliance is off track, I want to be able to help them identify, like, well, part of the issue is that you keep identifying A as your motivation for going, and I can clearly see that it's B, but they don't agree with that. Like, how does that make sense?
It does.
What I'm talking about?
It does. And there's two things here that are coming up. So one is ambivalence is a huge, like, ambivalence often shows up as like low motivation or like not following through. So that's one thing. And I want to come back to that. But the first thing is, like, we need to go back farther and say, well, are you assessing your clients effectively at the beginning of coaching? And in my onboarding process, we talk about values directly, and I share an exercise that helps them define what their values are, so that they're actually looking at, well, what am I doing in my current life that does align with my values? What am I doing that doesn't? And then we don't just look at, does my goal align with my values, but do the things that I have to do to reach my goal, do those align with my values, right? Because you could say, like, yeah, losing weight aligns with my values, but it doesn't align with my values to skip out on Friday night pizza night with my family, right? Fantastic. Yeah. Then that means that the approach to reach your goals must include these values aligned activities. And that helps with the process, right? But often we don't look at it from that perspective. So it's like, well, I'm doing the thing that like helps you reach the goal, but along the way, there's all these little tiny activities or behaviors that don't align with your values. And so that feels really misaligned. So that's kind of like at the beginning where we can really help people. I mean, you can do this at any time. It doesn't have to be the beginning, but I would encourage it to be at the beginning.
Right.
And then coming back to ambivalence. So ambivalence often shows as like low motivation, or like a coach is on a call with a client and they're like, oh yeah, I'll do that thing. And then they don't do it. Or like, it looks like people aren't quote unquote like committed to a process, but often what they're experiencing is two things at the same time. Like ambivalence is essentially like, I'm feeling two ways about this goal or about this change, right? And so that might show up as someone saying on a call, they're like, I really want to meal prep. Like this week, I'm totally going to meal prep. But they're also feeling like, yeah, but if I meal prep on Sundays, that means I'm not able to watch Sunday football with my friends and like hang out with them like I always do, right? So there's ambivalence there. On one side, they do want to meal prep, but on the other side, they also do want to not meal prep. And so I actually have a podcast episode on this. So if you go to the Confident Coaching podcast, you can listen to the podcast on ambivalence. I don't remember what number it is, but I think it says ambivalence in the title. But this is also something like humans, like I experience this where it's like, hey, on one side, I really want to do this thing, but on the other side, I want to do this other thing. And that's where we get to look at, well, what takes precedence? We get to resolve that ambivalence. And I think there's a lot of judgment around that, where it's like someone will feel, well, I told my coach that this is the goal, so I must want this thing. And it's like, no, you can change your mind at any time. And the more we know, the more likely we are to be able to make like an effective decision for ourselves of, hey, I thought I wanted this thing, but actually I don't. And that's totally fine. And this is where within my mentorship, what we look at is communication skills and coaching methods. And so you cannot expand your coaching methods and like offer values-based goal setting and all of this stuff if you don't have the communication skills to back it up. Because otherwise you're still just throwing suggestions and recommendations at a client without actually being able to connect with them on a deeper level and understand, how do I communicate with this person in a way that helps them feel safe and understood and like supports their change. And so when we talk about ambivalence, if a coach is seeing this, if a coach is seeing like, hey, my client says that they want this thing, but they're doing this other thing, we can use our communication skills to be like, hey, Joe, I know for the last couple of check-ins, you mentioned that you had the goal to do meal prep, but I noticed meal prep didn't get done. And I'm wondering here, like, what's going on in your life that might get in the way of this? And how is that other thing important to you? And I think coaches will often shy away from like the tough conversations. They'll just like try to throw more suggestions like, hey, well, what if you try meal prepping this way? Or what if you do this thing? And this can be really frustrating because you're like, I'm giving this person so much help and they're not taking my help. And so we'll hear coaches say like, they must not want it bad enough. And this is where I actually want to throw this back on the coach and say, we need to be better at communicating. We need to be better at like reading between the lines and listening in a more effective way, because your client is sharing their emotions about things, their views on things, their perceptions. And we need to be able to listen for that and respond to it.
In this very moment, it makes so much sense to me why the mentorship is called the Confident Coaching Mentorship. Because as you are sharing what you just so eloquently shared, what I'm thinking of is the coach that's like, yeah, but if I start digging into that, I'm not sure that I have the tools to be able to handle that, which that's what's called a lack of confidence. And go figure, confident coaching. It all makes sense to me now. Sometimes it takes me a while.
The files are in the computer. Millennials will understand that reference from Zoolander.
Sometimes it takes me a little bit of a minute, but I eventually get there. So props on the name then, because that totally makes sense. Because what I can picture is, and I know that you are effective on multiple levels, and also just based on who I'm around the majority of the time, what I can picture is the coach who got into coaching with a true desire to help others experience the transformation or evolution or growth that they have had. And then they first started off with primarily like the macro counting as the primary tool, and understanding the general importance of relationship building and connection and things like that. And are now they're in it. Like they're in the thick of it at this point. They probably saw a massive boom a couple of years ago, like around post 2020. And then they potentially have seen their business somewhat kind of drop off. And now they feel like they're just in this sea of other coaches with having to use tools that they don't feel like really align with who they are and different things like that. And they're like, okay, I know I need to have these conversations, but I'm not sure that I'm equipped to do that. And looking for something that has a similar, I'm not going to say this the best way, and I'm just going to say it the way that I think it has a similar sort of, okay, I can go back to this. I can follow something that provides me at least with some sort of a framework to bounce on, like macro counting. So understanding, okay, this is the framework I can use as like the scaffolding is what I'll call it for a conversation with a client as we start to peel back the layers. Because I think that for many coaches, macro counting becomes the default because it's something that's very binary. Either you hit the number or you didn't hit the number, whereas having an actual conversation to dissect what really matters to you when it comes to how you're going to have some consistency, that's a bit more like, some people would even put it in the woo-woo category, because they're just like, well, there's no sort of like structure around that. And that's just basically a whole lot of conversation. Well, yeah, if you don't understand how to properly like structure a conversation and then be able to put together some actionable tips from that conversation, then yeah, it's gonna feel like you're just having a chat. However, I would actually challenge you on that, because many times, and I've used I've used a lot of the tips that you've shared on your podcast, in combination with other tools. And what I've found is that it's very interesting when clients start to walk away from conversations that they didn't feel like they just went through a coaching conversation. They just felt like they just had a conversation, and they also generated the two things that they're going to do coming out of that conversation. So the whole time it was a very like organized, I mean, it's not rigid, but it's an organized conversation where, okay, we're going to start with these two jumping off points, and then we're going to dig into those and blah, blah, blah. And it just feels like a natural back and forth. And by the end of it, they're just like, okay, based on what we talked about, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And I'm super excited because I know like that my husband's going to be really excited about it, because he had always mentioned like he wanted to do this. I'm like, okay, cool. So we've got an action plan. And they're like, that's weird. Like, that didn't feel like we just went through a whole strategy session. Like, I felt like we were just kind of talking about some stuff. I'm like, perfect. Absolutely perfect.
That is, so you just described like a really effective conversation. And this is, so I'm trained in motivational interviewing, and my motivational interviewing trainer, who is a psychologist, works for British weightlifting, is like such an incredible dude. The guy that trained me, who's qualified through like the Mint motivational interviewing network of trainers, all of that stuff. Anyways, the way that he describes motivational interviewing is just having a really great conversation. And the amazing thing is like, so what part of the framework that I coach clients through is like, we need to be able to connect with our clients on a deeper level. And that is what really inspires deep change, is like when you feel like you have really solid social support, the person you're working with cares about you, the person that you're working with understands you, that also helps you build your self-efficacy. And I just spoke to a client of mine yesterday who'd been working with me for a couple of years. And she was like, there were times in our coaching process when I didn't believe in myself. And the reason that I kept going, even though, maybe in other moments of my life I would have given up, is because I felt like you offered that really solid social support base for me to feel safe and cared for, and for that, where I felt like you were showing me compassion so that I could show myself compassion. And this is someone who literally, like I just recorded a podcast with her yesterday about kind of her whole journey. And this client, when she came into working with me, was very much the like, I've been tracking macros, I've been dieting my entire life, like my self-worth will improve once I finally reach my ideal weight. And her life now is, when I asked her to sort of describe her results, there was no even talk of like body or food in there, because it's just not like, it's not a huge part of what she thinks about anymore. And that is, for me, where we want to be getting individuals to the point where it's like food and their body and their weight does not consume a ton of mental space anymore. And they have the mental space to be the person that they want to be.
Man. Perfect. Yeah, I could start a whole nother podcast off of just what you mentioned. I'm gonna wrap it up within the next few minutes here, because I feel like you just kind of opened up another piece there too, which goes back a bit to something that I was mentioning earlier. I believe me. So I'm not putting this on anyone else. I believe that a challenge that we as coaches face is when talking about getting to that point where there's not the, what I'll call, obsession with how I look or my perception of how people think I look. And if my third ab oblique isn't popping, like just not that massive focus on everything. That's always the main thing that matters. I believe that when we communicate that, sometimes it's misunderstood or misperceived as, okay, then I'm not going to quite get the exact results that I was looking for. And from my experience with clients and coming up on year number 10, this will be 10th year in coaching. More often than not, my clients who were looking for, like, came in with leading with the aesthetic, and then we got to the point that you're talking about where it wasn't any longer like obsessing over like the next progress photo and counting the macro to the nth degree and things like that. Those were the ones that tended to end up achieving the aesthetic goal that they initially came in with. But it was almost like I literally had to go back and point that out as like a byproduct, for lack of a better way to put it, of removing that being the main focus. It's like the person who says, I want to be a millionaire. And so we're working through the process and we're starting to talk about, okay, you want to be a millionaire. All right, how often do you want to see your family? How many hours a week do you want to work? You know, how much stress do you want? Things like that. And so we start like putting together the lifestyle that they want. And then later on, it's like they just happen to check their bank account and they see that they're actually at $1 million. And that's the part that is the story that I tell myself, is that that's the part where if we could just get more people to really like work with us to understand that the more and more and more pressure that they're putting on that specific thing, the further it's kind of taking them away from that specific thing, because they're like, they keep kind of skipping over the other stuff. Does that kind of
it makes
sense?
Perfect sense. And this is where like so many coaches are like, you just need to trust the process. Like I just want my clients to like love the process. And this is where this actually comes, this is like a trickle down thing. This comes from the coach, that if we are promoting a specific outcome, then of course we're going to bring clients in that are looking for a specific outcome. If we are showing them the kind of person that they can become along the process, the outcome will happen, right? And this is where it goes back to being really specific about what are the experiences that your client wants to have as the person that they want to become, right? So let's say they're like, I want to build muscle, right? It's like, well, the person that they need to become is someone that goes to the gym regularly, but also rests regularly. So like, what experiences do they need to be having in their regular life to support being someone that has built muscle? And I think that's where in marketing, we like as coaches, we can really improve around, can we stop promoting so much of the result? If you want your clients to trust the process and invest in the process, show them why the process is important. Not, and I want to make a caveat here, is not show them why the process is important just to reach the goal. Because if we're like, you gotta fall in love with the basic stuff in order to reach this fat loss goal, it's like they're not falling in love with the basic stuff. They're just falling in love with the idea of, if I do this, then I will reach the goal. But if you're like, if you're talking about, the experience of like making it fun. And I remember answering this question for one of my mentorship clients around like, how do I get my client to eat more veggies? She says she wants to do it, but she doesn't do it. And we talked about, she has a family, and it can be a thing that she does as an experience of spending time with her kids, of talking about like the nutrients and different colors of food and like involving them in the process. And I remember her coming back to me. She's like, I presented this to my client and she got so excited about this idea because it actually became something that like is part of her process of being like a good mom, being a mom that sets an example, rather than just like, well, I got to hit my veggie intake to hit my fiber to lose weight.
I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty sure that I probably have something that has to do with like, you got to learn to fall in love with the basics.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing.
And I'm okay with that. To be like, I'm totally cool with that.
And it's an accurate statement. It's like, yeah, you got to learn to love the basics. I think the question is
Yeah.
why?
Yeah. I jotted this down because I feel like I should like Venmo or PayPal you or whatever you have access to. Cause when you unlocked something for me here as we're wrapping up with, from a marketing standpoint, like, can we promote the process? Like, promote the process really is that particular piece. Because I think it's one thing, and I'm gonna have to go back and like listen to this and dissect it again. It's one thing to like promote the process, and it's another thing to promote the process because it's going to specifically give you this outcome. Because really what you're doing is then when you promote the process because it gives you the specific result, then all we're doing is creating that infinite loop and the hamster wheel
Yep.
that we're saying we're trying to get people off of. So
Yeah, because
that,
then people are
yeah,
like,
that
I'm
totally
going
came
to the
through.
gym every day, but I'm only going to the gym every day because you promised me I'm going to get this result. Where it's like, then we go back to what we talked about self-determination theory earlier and motivation. And like, then it just becomes of, I'm doing this because this is what I should do. It becomes another should rather than no, I'm going to the gym every day because this is my time where I listen to my podcast and I know I'm going to feel better afterwards. And because I'm someone who values physical fitness or my alone time or the mental benefits, like, this is where we can really help people dig into why is it that you want to be doing these things aside from whatever physical result you're getting. It's okay to want a physical result. It's totally fine. There's no shame in that at all. But if that's the only reason you want something, yeah, you probably are going to struggle with maintaining consistent motivation towards whatever goal that is.
Yeah, so well put. So well put. Okay, well, I'm gonna start wrapping things up here. Before wrapping up, is there anything that I have not brought up, addressed, anything like that that you were wanting to make sure, like, hey, I got to make sure I get this thing in. I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of space just in case.
No, I think the only thing that I would say is that, like, I know coaches really want to learn. And like, that's one of the beautiful things about people that become coaches is that they're like, I want to be learning and doing what's best for my clients and for my business and all of that. And all of the things that I'm talking about, this is all like education and skill building. Like, this is all stuff that you can do. It's not necessarily stuff that you're going to learn from like taking another completely passive course that's just a bunch of video lectures, which is why I believe so deeply in the power of mentorship. And the way that my mentorship is structured is education. So there is an education side, of course, because that's really important. But then there's also the application side of like, let's take what you're learning and let me actually help you integrate that into how you work with your clients and how you structure your programs. Because all of us have bought a course and been like, well, that was really helpful, but like, I know the definition of a lot of things, right? And
Yeah, now what?
exactly. And I've talked to so many coaches that have been through very well-known like coaching programs and mentorship programs, and then have come to me and be like, I feel like I have a lot of information, but I'm still not understanding how to actually put this in practice in my coaching, like my conversations and the way that I talk to clients and the way that I structure my programs. And that's the problem that my mentorship solves, is from day one, helping coaches actually apply in their coaching practice the things that they're learning.
And well, I emphatically co-sign that, because the people generally, what I find, whether it's clients and or coaches, typically the thing that is going to help them continue to progress and move to the next phase or whatever it may be, or just continue to grow where they are, in outside of coaching, like in the other businesses that I'm involved in, we call it mastery or mobility. So is somebody looking for mobility where they're going to continue to move up different rungs of the ladder, or are they looking to remain where they are and still master that? So whether you're a coach, this is just me saying, whether you're a coach who's looking for mastery at the level that you're currently at, or you're looking for mobility where you want to continue to elevate, being involved in a program like Gillian has with the Confident Coaching Mentorship is extremely important, because more knowledge is okay, but when you're in the thick of it and you need to be able to figure out like, okay, well, how do I make these adjustments, or how do I riff on this? And business is really, really hard as an entrepreneur. So also understanding like just the mental side of like, wait, I'm trying to run a business and I'm trying to help this particular individual, and what matters to me as a coach, like the values that I espouse to have and the lifestyle that I want as a coach. So I think being involved in something like the Confident Coaching Mentorship is definitely something that I would encourage people to do. And, send me your links so I can make sure that I have everything in the show notes, because the emails that you put out too, I think if folks are wondering, okay, well, how, like, what do those conversations look like? Or, I'll call it like proof of concept, like being able to get proof that Gillian is like the real deal. When you read her emails, you can really tell what's going on there. So like real life examples. So props to you
Thank
on
you.
that. I really appreciate
just
you
want
taking the
everybody to
time
know,
to do
like,
this.
I did not pay him to say that.
Oh no.
I didn't, but I'm just sitting here. I'm like, wow, I need to hire JK for my marketing campaigns.
I got you for free.
I love
like,
it.
for real.
I love it. I really
think
appreciate
I would,
it. And
yeah.
and I feel like you've been around. I mean, you've been around since like 2020 and kind of seen
Clubhouse
Clubhouse
alumni.
days and seen this
That's where it
evolve.
started.
So yeah, and it means a lot coming from you, because you truly are like one of the coaches that I really respect in our space.
I appreciate that.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anybody, well, hopefully, I believe that anybody who's listening to this and has interacted with me in some way, shape, or form understands that I don't typically do a whole lot of like, yeah, I co-signed this just because it's some paid part of the folks. Yeah. I get paid $0 for
he gets paid through my virtual friendship.
There you go. And like copious dad jokes and different things like that. So yeah. But yeah, for real, it's I promise we are wrapping up. It's just I'm blessed to be around a lot of different coaches, like a lot, because especially nutrition coaches, because not only in the business that I work in, because I'm the director of programming for a nutrition company, but also just because I'm the trainer guy, a lot of nutrition coaches will talk to me about different things that they're going through with their clients and whatnot, that they don't want to talk to other nutrition coaches about, because there's still this belief of like needing to kind of gatekeep what they do. And I want to make sure I'm not talking about these particular methods that I use with my clients because another nutrition coach is going to take it, but they'll talk to me about it because they're like, well, I know you're not out there trying to find one-on-one nutrition clients. So when a lot of the things that you talk about, like, folks, I am telling you, like, the stuff that Gillian is talking about is the real deal, that some nutrition coaches just are not really comfortable talking about the fact that they're struggling with these things, and they feel like they just need that confidence in order to build their business a bit more and help their clients with more than just, stay within 5 grams of this or that, or green, yellow, red on your tracker sheet. So that's why I'm passionate about publicizing what you do, because again, behind the scenes as the quote unquote trainer guy, I get access to a lot of conversations that don't necessarily happen in public. And there's more coaches really lacking confidence in this area than are willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. And I'm like, you don't have to struggle with that. Like there's a solution for that,
I'm right here. I got you, buddy.
I know.
I got all you. And yeah. And this is where it's like, I think there is a lot of shame in being like, I'm a nutrition coach that still doesn't know a lot of like things. Like I'm supposed to, as nutrition coaches, we're magically supposed to know everything. And that's absolutely not true. I think in my business, when I've seen the most growth is when I've had personal support, when I've had a mentor or a guide to be like, hey, this is what's going on with a client, or this is what's going on in, in the structure of how I do things. Can you give me a hand and like help me either help me educate myself or help me see a different perspective? And yeah, I mean, I've spent so much money on mentorship and education and all of that, and I will continue to do so for the
Yeah.
rest of my career.
Experiences.
Exactly.
They're experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. For real, it's I've tried everything, but nothing's working. Like, just think about that as coaches, how many times we've heard clients say that.
Yeah.
Well, I've tried everything, but nothing's working. And you know exactly what would work.
And you're just like, hire me,
And
hire me.
right. And it's the same thing as a nutrition coach where you're like,
Yeah.
well, I've tried everything. We tried bringing up this, we tried bringing down that. We got this test, we got that. Yeah, there's all those pieces. And also, have you ever tried asking them, why does this goal matter to you?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So with that, Gillian, can you finish us off by letting folks know different places that they can connect with you and engage with you?
Yes, I am active on Instagram. You can come say hi. I am at Bite Size Nutri, like nutrition, but without the TION. And there you'll see snippets of my life in Barcelona. I share lots of coaching tips. You can also find
Fabulous
me
life.
at the Confident Coaching Podcast and the Bite Size Nutrition Podcast. And if you'd like to work with me in a mentorship capacity, I do offer one-on-one mentorship, and I also have my group mentorship, which is the Confident Coaching Mentorship, specifically to support coaches in learning how to coach beyond macros and apply a lot of the different techniques that we talked about today. And then I work with all kinds of people on a one-on-one nutrition coaching basis, mainly around relationship with food. We use a values-based approach, and we work on body image as well. And I've worked with both coaches, non-coaches, all different kinds of people in all different countries all over the world, and in 2 languages, in Spanish and in English.
Yeah.
So, and you
Gillian
can
does
find
it
all
all.
that. I'm going to share all of those links with JK, so you can find them in the show notes wherever you're listening.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Gillian does it all. She's got so many fun things going on. Last but certainly not least, how's your journaling going? I'm going to close out with that.
My journaling.
How's your journaling
It's
going?
honestly,
I forgot about that.
it's going so well. Like, it is for me. So I have ADHD. If you can't tell by the way that I communicate. But and one of the things for me that's been really challenging has been creating a more consistent meditation, mindfulness. Like, I do mindfulness practices in small bits throughout my day. That is really important to me. But I wanted like a dedicated moment in my day to journal and to be mindful about my internal world. And it's been really great. And part of the reason it's been great is because I haven't tried to go for what's ideal. I've been going for like what actually works for me, which is literally a 5-minute timer before I actually dive into work for the day. And it's given me a lot of calm. Like, surprisingly, 5 minutes a day has been really amazing for like my mental and emotional well-being. And thank you for asking.
Yeah, I just thought about that, and I was like, well, I'm going to do it off camera. And then I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do it off camera. Okay. All right. Well, folks.
This was a pleasure. I just want to say this was an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I would expect nothing less. So with that, folks, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I am going to close out by asking you to do me a favor and do not stop this podcast just because you know what I'm about to ask. Like, take 30 seconds and listen to what I'm about to say. Please hop on your platform that you're currently listening to and or watching this on and leave a rating, review, like, comment, whatever options it gives you. Something to let me know what you thought about today's episode and all that good stuff. That's all that I ask so that we can spread the impact of Help Me Understand. So with that, thank you, take care, and we'll talk to you next time.